Erev Shabbos, everybody. I want to talk about this day, Juneteenth. The significance of this day cannot be underestimated because it has a deep spiritual message in it. And it's, I think, a day that all Americans should embrace because of the value of this message. The story of how 2 months and 10 days after Robert E. Lee surrendered at Appomattox, and yet the word didn't come through yet, even though they already had telegraphs and Morse code and everything by that time in history. It didn't reach every area of the country, and Union soldiers came and let these men, women, and children know that they were free and that they had been free. I mean, this wasn't something that happened on that day that they became free. Whether you want to count 2 years earlier the Emancipation Proclamation or 2 months earlier the surrender of the Confederacy. They received what we would call in Judaism mashmur achaika, a faraway news, something that happened a long time ago. Even one day is late to hear something like that. Should have been much earlier. And that they got the news that they were free. And there's two things that come to mind to me about this historical event. It took place in Galveston, Texas, 155 years ago. I'm sorry, 145 years ago. No, 155 years ago today. Message that has to be embraced is twofold. So on one hand, I think in our own history is a similar story that was backwards. As much as there are a lot of people want to compare this day to Passover, it was Etzem Hayom Hazeh. On that very day, there was no late news. Everybody left all together. The youth and the old together went to serve the Lord. And we all went out together. There was nobody who got the news 2 months later or 2 years later, which is incredible when you think about it, about how much society fell from that zenith of history when we received the Torah, and how much more advanced people were in ancient times, and how through the dark ages we lost technology and knowledge and all kinds of things, and that there's been a spiritual entropy that's gone on since those days. And not only that, but other forms of entropy. But there's another event that for us, obviously, it's the opposite. That, to me, reminds me of this story. There's a Mishnah in the 5th chapter of Tractate Nazir. And Tractate Nazir talks about the laws of the Nazir. The Nazir is the Nazirite, the person who takes an oath to not cut their hair, to not have any grape products, so not drink any wine, not become impure by contact with corpses, so they can't visit cemeteries, they can't go to funerals, and so forth. So the men and women who take this oath undergo a certain process to be released from the oath. In general, the oath is something someone takes for a set amount of time. Usually it was 30 days. And then after that, to be released from the oath, they had to bring sacrifices in the temple. Nowadays, if someone would take such an oath, they'd be bound to that for life, because there's no temple, there's nowhere to bring sacrifices, so no way to be absolved of the oath, and so they'd be stuck with it for the rest of their lives, or at least until the temple is rebuilt. And there was a Rabbi Cohen, who was a student of Rabbi Cook, who was known as the Nazir. His son was a rabbi in Israel, passed away recently, 10, 15 years ago, I guess. Also Rabbi Cohen, famous for being a vegetarian and so forth. In any event, so we have a story about Nazarites, about Nazirim, who came to Jerusalem. They lived in Babylonia, took this oath upon themselves, and then came up to Jerusalem to make their pilgrimage and bring their sacrifices to be absolved of this oath, of this vow. And when they got to Jerusalem, they found out that the temple had been destroyed. And so one of the rabbis at the time was there, made a mistake, according to those who disagreed with him there, and said to them, if you had known that the temple was destroyed, or that the temple would be destroyed when you come here to offer the sacrifices, would you have taken this vow? And they said no, and so he released them from the vow, and they would, they didn't need to remain Nazarites for the rest of their lives. They were able to go back. He annulled their Nazarite vow to begin with. I mean, to say the vow from its very beginning was invalid, whereas there was a disagreement there. And the other rabbi said, no, and this would have been the halacha, it's only the case if you took the vow after the temple had been destroyed and you didn't know. But if you had taken the vow before the temple was destroyed, and then in the meantime the temple was destroyed, you're still bound to the vow, and you'll be stuck with that until the temple is rebuilt. And 1950 years later, and we still don't have a temple. So here, that's what we have. The reverse of that story. And yet, in a sense, a similar story, because they were, if they indeed took this vow after the temple was destroyed, so they found out that there was no vow and that they were free. And essentially, I think that's the message of this day of Juneteenth, the value of this day, the spiritual message of this day, is particularly one of what you already are. You have been free all this time and you didn't know it. How many people are enslaved to addictions or even benign habits or other limitations they placed upon themselves, and they believe that they're stuck there and they're never going to be free. And what they didn't realize is that they were free all along, you know. Some people fear freedom. It's part of the problem. You know, the Yismach Yisrael, the Alexander Rebbe, asks an incredible question, an obvious question that it's incredible because why didn't anyone else ask it? You're talking about someone who lived 130 years ago, and how come it's another 3,000 years before that nobody asked this question? And even if someone did, the answer that he gives is very good. I'm sure other people asked the question. I'm embellishing that a little bit. So it says, the Ten Commandments begin with, I am the Lord thy God, who took you out of the land of Egypt, Mibeis Avodim, from the house of slaves, from the house of bondage, the house of slavery. Alexander Rebbe says, what's pshat? The house of bondage. Why not? He took us out of bondage. He took us out of slavery. What's this house of slavery? The house of slavery means that we feel at home in our slavery. We feel at home in our addictions. We feel at home in our habits. We feel at home in our limitations. We feel comfortable and we don't want to get out of our comfort zone. Why is there such recidivism in prisons? Because so many people feel that as much as they might hate their prison, they're not ready to live outside of it. How many times it happens that someone spent 20 years in prison, and when they go free, they don't know how to live. Some of them just go and commit another crime just so they can go back home to their slavery. And so that Egyptian mindset this belief that we are enslaved and we're at home in the slavery, that's what we have to be told. You know, you were free a long time ago. You've really always been free. Our sages say, he who acquires for himself a slave acquires for himself a master. Because if you have, according to the Torah law, if you have only one pillow, you can't be selfish and keep it for yourself. You have to give it for your slave. You have to treat your slave better than you. If you have a steak to eat, there's only one. You could cut it in half and share it with the slave, or you just give it to him, but you can't eat it all yourself. And the message behind that is not only to the master, but even really to the slave himself, that you really are free. You really are not a slave. You think you're a slave, but you're not a slave. You are free. The main thing is to be free on the inside. And the truth is, I work in prison ministry, and often I tell the guys how many of them are more free while they're physically in the walls of the prison than how many of their peers on the outside are really imprisoned when they might be physically free. And their imprisonment is of their own making. Freedom is your choice. You are free already. You've been free for a while. Embrace that freedom. And what freedom is the most important freedom? It's not like what Janis Joplin said, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. That's not what it means. Our sages say what the true freedom is. Because we mentioned the Ten Commandments, and it says by the Ten Commandments, they were choros ala luchos, they were engraved into the tablets of stone. And the word, the Hebrew word choros, if you put a different vowel there, which means engraved, spells cherus, spells freedom. So our sages say no one is truly free except the one who engages in the study of Torah and follows a Torah life. The discipline of a devoted religious life is what sets us free. So and the thing is, it was there all along. It's already engraved on the tablets of your heart. You just have to embrace it. You just have to live it. It's already there. You just have to engage with it and open up your heart to let it in and recognize the freedom that you already have. How many people have said that, before they adopted a Torah life and they were so quote-unquote liberal and quote-unquote free-spirited, how much they felt that they were enslaved by society, enslaved by peer pressure, enslaved by all kinds of things in life. And by embracing the mantle of Torah, they found out that they could really be free. Let's embrace that on this day. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment, and we'll see you later.